One of the things that makes great teaching great is that you have great stories. One of the things that makes great preaching great is that it includes great stories. One of the things that makes a great book great is that it includes great stories. And one of the things that we love about the Bible is that it includes so many great stories. And we're going to look today at one of the great stories, one of the dramatic stories of the Bible, one of the stories we love to read to our children, along with David and Goliath and the parting of the Red Sea and so on. And this is the Showdown at Mt Carmel. And we want to look in this story about what we can learn about God, what we can learn about ourselves, and what can we learn about Christian living. What is the application of this passage? We always want to be doers of the word and not hearers only, and so deceive ourselves. And so let's look at this classic passage today, 1 Kings chapter 18. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. I'll show you a map here. It's up in the northern region of Israel. And I've actually got a picture and then some drone footage if you'd like to see what it looks like on Mount Carmel today. It's not a terribly high mountain, about 1,700 feet. I hiked yesterday. No, that was the day before. Yesterday, I hiked the highest peak in Texas. It was about 3,000 feet vertical, and this would be about half that. At any rate, verse 21, Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions?" Now, let's just pause right there and think about what is the application of that for our life. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. Baal is the most important of the many gods of the Canaanites. He represented the harvest and fertility, and the worship Baal often included prostitution. Quite a church growth strategy, you think? Verse 22, then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. We're going to look next week at Elijah's depression, and we get a hint about his depression there. And you might ask your people, by the way, to read next week's passage and see what we can learn about depression from that. Verse 23, get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces, put some stakes on the wood, but not set it on fire. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set it on fire. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Now I'm skipping here to the New Living Translation. I'll show you why in just a second. But verse 26, so they prepared one of the bulls and placed it on the altar. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, O Baal, answer us. And we learned something about Christian living from that we're going to look at in just a moment. But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar they had made about noontime. They started about 6 in the morning, about sunup. At noontime, Elijah began mocking them. You'll have to shout louder, he scoffed, for surely he is a god. Perhaps he is daydreaming, or perhaps he is relieving himself. I say it respectfully, perhaps he is sitting on the pot. Or maybe he is away on a trip, or is asleep, or needs to be awakened. So they shouted louder, following their normal custom. What do we learn about our God, Christianity? What do we learn about non-Christianity? They cut themselves with knives and sword until the blood gushed out. They all raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice, but still there was no sound, no reply, and no response. Elijah, he took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stone to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar, large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, and laid the stakes, I like to say, on the wood. Then he said, fill 4 large jars of water and pour the water over the offering and the wood. After they had done this, he said, do the same thing again. And when they were finished, he said, now do it a 3rd time. So they did as he said, and the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. At the usual time for offering the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed. And look at what his prayer is like compared to the 12 hours of praying we've been looking at. O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have brought them back to yourself. Immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull and the wood and the stones and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground, and they cried out, "The Lord, He is God. Yes, the Lord, He is God." What do we learn about God, about ourselves, about Christian living from this? And my observation is this, and by the way, I stole many of these ideas. I'm not sure exactly which ones now. But I did a Google search for this story and came across an article by David Jeremiah. And want to do a little shout out to him and thanks to David Jeremiah. I like to say when David Jeremiah starts writing better sermons, I'll start doing better teaching. But anyway, his first observation and mine is this: all religions are not the same. All religions are not the same. This is a very popular idea in our culture, that you have your belief and I have my belief, and they're all heading to the same place. And your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and all truth and all religions are about the same. And it is simply not true. Some people claim that all religions are essentially the same and are only superficially different. The truth is, all religions are essentially different and are only superficially the same. Some say all religions are similar because they all teach ethics. The truth is that other world religions fundamentally seek to help bad people become better by choosing better personal ethics. As I have said to you many times, by asking people simply to try really hard to be good. And as I've said to you a few times, we make two mistakes in our teaching. Do you remember what they are? The first mistake is we fail to teach for application. But the second mistake is we teach application, but we simply tell people to try really hard to be good. And that is not the Christian gospel. That is the way of all the earth. Christianity, on the other hand, invites spiritually dead people to become spiritually alive. He quotes John 3:5. Truth is, a good part of John 3 could be described that way. So let's talk for a second about what makes a cult a cult. What makes the Christian faith the Christian faith, and what delineates everything outside the Christian faith. And this is something I've gone over a few times, and I would encourage you to go over it with your people over and over again. This is something that every one of your people ought to know. And I'll tell you, my people don't know it yet, and I guess many of your people don't know it yet. But there are fundamentally three things that make a cult a cult, and by contrast, there are three things that separate Christianity, true Christianity, from all other religions. The first is they have an alternative truth source other than the Bible. In other words, you cannot get to Mormon theology if you have the Bible and only the Bible. The Reformers said it this way: it's sola scriptura. The Bible and the Bible alone is our source of truth. We may look to creeds, we may look to books, we may look to other authorities, we may hear sermons and preaching and teaching and so on, but fundamentally the Bible is our only source of truth. And every cult has other truth books, or they take the Bible, as Jehovah's Witnesses do, and they translate it in their own way. They mistranslate it, we might say, that doesn't agree with the best scholars of the Greek and Hebrew to come up with their own doctrine. So there's an alternative truth source. Secondly, they believe that Jesus is sort of God, kind of God, little bit God, almost God, brother of God, son of God, but not God, a very God. This is the fundamental truth of the Christian life, that the Bible is our only truth source, and Christ is God and God Himself. And the third thing that marks all cults is that they believe that we are saved by grace plus works. I would encourage you to ask your people a second question. First one is, what makes a cult a cult? The second question is, what are some common cults today? And I'll give you three of the most common, and that is Mormons and Jehovah's Witness and Scientology. And there could be many others, but we want to teach our people what are those cults that we need to be very, very careful about, because all religions are not the same. This passage teaches us that all religions are not the same. Now, there are four more subtle cults I talked to you about a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. I'd like to refresh your memory about. The first two go together, and that is the prosperity gospel and the poverty gospel go together. The prosperity gospel is fundamentally that gospel that says that God will positively answer every prayer, that He wants you to be healthy and wealthy and wise, and He wants all to go well with you. And it does not teach the idea that in this world you will have, what is that next word? Trouble. In this world you will have trouble. And if you do not continually teach your people that in this world they will have trouble, you do not prepare them to live on planet Earth, but because eventually they're going to have trouble. An equally troubling heresy in our world is what I could call the poverty gospel, the po-me gospel. It is my belief that Christians ought to work at being the most hope-filled, faith-filled, confident, optimistic people on the planet. That we ought to work diligently, and I will tell you it is difficult. In this world we will have trouble, and there's lots of influences in this world that are going to pull us away from being faith-filled, hope-filled, confident. The Bible says that faith is confidence, and optimistic people on the planet, and we want to work at being those kind of people and not being that poverty gospel people. Billy Graham says, only the forward-looking Christian remains sincerely optimistic and joyful, knowing that Christ will win in the end. Is that what characterizes your faith? Is that what characterizes your people's faith? Would you say that you stand before or sit in a group with Christians this week that are faith-filled, hope-filled, optimistic, confident people? We want to be people who work on being those kind of people. So what other heresies do we have today? Well, I can think of two more. And again, we talked about these about a month ago. I wonder how well you remember them. Good teaching always has some element of review. But anyway, my next cult, my next heresy is what I call the Oprah Gospel. This vague, unfocused sense of spirituality that is not rooted in the Bible, that is not rooted in historicity, that is not rooted in the facts of history and the resurrection of Jesus Christ and so on. And it's a very popular idea this day, this vague, unfocused sense of spirituality taught by Oprah and many others. And the last one is what I call God on the shelf. And this is that belief that believes in Orthodox Christianity. It just believes it's not very important, that I can safely put God on the shelf and ignore him until I need him. And it is a heresy. Well, those are some heresies, some cults that are around in our day. Let's look at more deeply at the misbelief in their day. In their religion, they thought that they would be heard because of their many words. But Jesus said, and when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. That's what these people thought. They thought they would be heard because of their many words. Jesus said, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Martin Luther said, prayer is not overcoming God's reluctance. It is laying hold of God's willingness. In their religion, they thought that they would be heard because of their many, many numbers. Then Elijah said to them, am I the only one of the Lord's prophets left? But Baal has 450 prophets. James taught us, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a single righteous person. Of one righteous person. I looked it up in the Greek. It's singular in Greek as it is in English. The prayer of a single righteous person is powerful and effective. And there's nothing wrong with asking your friends to pray for you, but there is something wrong with the belief that if I can just get enough people to go along with me in prayer, then I can manipulate God into giving me what I want. In their religion, they thought they would be heard because of their much drama. But Jesus said, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you, not because of your drama, but in the quiet act of prayer in the closet. There are experiences of what St. Teresa of Avila calls the prayer of quiet, where all words become superfluous. In silence, we behold the Lord, for words are not needed there to be our communion. In their religion, they thought they would be heard because they hurt themselves. And you might not think this would be very common today. I'm going to show you a short video of something very common in the Philippines where I grew up.
For some people, it's not enough to remember the agony of Christ at Easter. They have to suffer themselves. Every year, thousands of men parade through the towns and villages all over the Philippines carrying the burden that Christ bore. A wooden block embedded with glass can make a young man's back a mass of blood. The tradition of whipping oneself as penance for one's sins was introduced to the Philippines 400 years ago. Spanish missionaries thought it would convince the natives of the strength of their religion. Now even the youngest Filipino can show his devotion to the Prince of Peace through suffering.
In short, in their religion, they thought they would be heard because of something that they did, because they screamed real loud, because they hollered, because they danced, because they got a big group of people together. But in our religion, we believe that God is God and we are not, and we lay our requests before him, and we put them at his feet, and we leave them there, as one old song had it. So observation number one, all religions are not the same. Observation number two, activity and enthusiasm are not always a sign of spirituality. As the old saying goes, it is not how high you jump, it is how straight you walk when you come down. It is not how high you jump, it is not how loud the worship service is. It is what kind of lives are we creating. Midday passed and they continued their frantic prophesying, and yet they were not heard. Observation number three, faith can be misplaced. In other words, it's not the amount of your faith that makes a difference. That's why Jesus talked about the faith the size of a mustard seed, because ultimately it is not the amount of your faith that makes a difference. It is the object of your faith. Place all your faith in God and God alone, and then watch mountains move. A little boy came home from school and his dad said, "How'd you do on the test today?" He said, "Well, I think I flunked the math test." The father said, "You need to be more positive than that." And so the kid said, "Okay, I'm positive I flunked my math test today." And the big idea is positive thinking is not faith. Positive thinking is not faith. Or as I like to put it, faith in faith is not our faith. Faith in faith is not our faith. Our faith is a faith in God that loves us, who delights in doing for his children, and will often answer us positively. But we cannot manipulate God because of how many people we get to pray, how loudly we pray, how much we dance, how much drama there is, and so on. And faith can be misplaced. Observation number four, and it appears to be this is really the main point of this passage, and that is somewhere along the line, we must all decide where we will put our faith, where we will put our trust, where we will put our confidence. Somewhere along the line, we must all decide. Elijah went before the people and he said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. I saw this on Facebook the other day. Be decisive. Right or wrong, make a decision. The road of life is paved with flat squirrels who couldn't make up their minds. Reminds us the words of Joshua 24:15. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable for you, and that's the real test. That's the real question. Do you believe that serving the Lord is desirable for you? Do you believe it is good for you to follow God? It is my conviction that it is always in our best interest to live the Christian life. It is always good for us to follow God, that it is desirable, that God is a rewarder. Anyone who would come to God must do two things. They must believe that God exists. The vast majority of people on planet Earth do that. They do believe that God exists. What they do not believe is the second part of Hebrews 11:6 formula, and that is they must believe that God exists, and they must believe that God is a rewarder, that God is a good Father, that it is good for us to follow God. And that is what Joshua says here. If serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. David Jeremiah started his sermon with a story from Michael Jordan, and I actually read it by Kyle Idleman as well, so I'm not sure who's copying who here. But at any rate, the story is that Michael Jordan went to this friend's house, and when he got there, they're going to go out to dinner, and when he got there, he said, "Hey, I'm a little bit cold and it's cooling off in the evening, and I forgot to bring a jacket. Could I grab a jacket from you?" And his friend said, "Yeah, there's a closet back there. Pick out whichever one you want." And so Michael Jordan goes back down the hall into a closet. And he comes back with a big armload of clothes, and he piles them on the floor, and he goes back and he gets some more stuff, and clothes and shoes and hats and coats and so on. And then he goes to the kitchen and he got a big knife, and he begins to just cut them all up. And he slices them all up, and he slices them all up, and he slices them all up. Then he gathers them together and goes out and throws them out in the dumpster. And it turns out about half of these clothes were Nike clothes, and about half these clothes were Puma clothes. And Michael Jordan then tells to his friend, he says, "Call my agent, and he'll replace all these clothes. He'll replace all these shoes. He'll replace all these jackets and so on. But you just can't ride the fence." And God stands before each one of us, and he says to us, "You just can't ride the fence." How long will you waver between two opinions? Today, you must decide whom you will follow. And that's why I would encourage you to encourage your people to pray the daily prayer. Encourage your people to pray the prayer today, and in their quiet time when they start their day with their Bible on their lap, they would pray this prayer every day. And that is, whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, whoever you want me to love, whoever you want me to serve, whoever you want me to forgive, even when it's hard to forgive. I will go, I will do, I will forgive. You are God, I am slave. And you want to encourage your people because God is a good, good Father, and it is always in our best interest to live the Christian life. You want to lead your people to pray this prayer today and every day, and may God richly bless you as you lead your people toward this today.